Hello everyone, and welcome to The Man Behind the Curtain. I'm Randy Young, the guy in the red shoes, and I've been in the video production business my entire career, and it's taken me around the world a few times. But more importantly, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most creative people in television, and boy do they have stories to tell about the business and the people who make it happen. We've always been told, ignore the man behind the curtain, but you can talk to me.
Okay, let's get started. I'm sitting here with a longtime friend, a man I've admired for a long time. I admire his business, the quality of his work, and mostly the guy that he is. He's John Featherstone. Hi, John.
Hi, Randy.
How are you
today? The feeling's entirely mutual, mate. And we were neighbors for a little while as well.
We were neighbors for a long time, and then you skedaddled off.
Yeah, I did indeed.
And then you came back to Chicago, so welcome home.
Well, thank you.
First question I'd like to ask everybody, just to set everything up. The short story of John Featherstone, how you got started and why.
Yeah, the why is something I'm still trying to figure out. The how was a circuitous path, as I think is the case with many of us, particularly being at the kind of age where there wasn't really a formal path into entertainment production in the same way there is now. I was playing drums in garage bands when I was in high school. And a kid moved into the neighborhood who had a cooler drum set. So it was suggested I find something else to do. So head hung low, tail between my legs. I was like, oh, screw you guys. I'm gonna sell my drums and I'll start doing the lights.
So was that Ringo?
Yeah, exactly right. Interestingly, you bring up Ringo. One of the arguments, I still contend to this day I was a better drummer, but he had a gold glitter Ludwig drum set, which was the same drum set that Ringo Starr played. So everyone was like, gold glitter Ludwig set. I was like, but I'm a better drummer. Gold glitter Ludwig set. I was like, okay, so visuals clearly matter was an early lesson. And then in relatively soon after that, I fell in with a bunch of lads who had founded a band called the Smiths in England. And I'm sure you've encountered this. Every once in a while, we're fortunate to have people come into our lives who are like members of a lost tribe, brothers from another mother, sisters from another mother. And Johnny Marr, the guitarist of the Smiths, was and still is like that. He's one of my best friends. Our families have been wrapped up in each other for 40 plus years. And he and I just clicked, and so I met them right before they released their first single in the UK. We were doing little shows. They took off like a bottle rocket. They were one of those lights that burned twice as bright for a quarter as long. And then when the Smiths imploded, before I even really knew it, was a lighting designer doing concert touring.
So concert touring, which you've now gone back into, did you ever leave it?
I don't think anybody that works in the creative side of entertainment, and I see this in the way you work too, ever really leaves it behind. Even when you're directing a corporate show, you direct it in a very specific way, which leans back into your roots doing live entertainment TV production. Right. And there's something about that in the way you work. I think you'd probably agree with that. Same thing with me. I think one of the things that was interesting about when we started Light Switch, and I'm sort of jumping ahead here a little bit, was we were right at that tipping point from corporate shows feeling like Broadway shows to corporate shows feeling like rock shows. Yeah, I don't think I ever really left doing concert touring, and I sort of dabbled in it back and forth. But the impetus to really leave concert touring was starting a family. And when I met my wife Kathy, she had a travel business at the time, and so this was back in the days when airlines cared about travel agents. So she could fly for free, and so she would come and join me on the road, and that was all great. And then we had Haley, who's sitting over there, working away with her headphones on. And I went back out on Van Halen, and I was like, oh no, this isn't working. So Norm, my founding partner at Light Switch, had for years been saying, you're going to get tired of doing this concert touring and all the travel, and we should start a design practice. And I was like, yeah, Norm, whatever. And finally I called him and was like, all right, you were right. I've got tired of doing all the travel. Let's do this design practice thing that you think is such a great idea. And it seems that is often the case with Norm. He was right.
Well, Norm is a smart man.
He's a very smart man. Yeah.
So tell me about that's how you started Light Switch. How did it develop to what it is today? Because it's huge now, as far as I can see, and very successful.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. I think it's safe to say we're one of the larger multidisciplinary design practices working in visual design in the world. There are other companies that are similar to what we do, but they tend to specialize. Our friends at Silent House, for example, very focused on live events and television, but not really any architecture. There's Shula Shook in Chicago, who are very focused on architecture, but don't really, other than one of the founders work with in the opera field, don't do a ton of live entertainment work. What we tend to do is straddle all of those. So I think a lot of the success of Light Switch is because of some deep philosophical tenets that were really important to Norm and I when we started the company. One of those was that the work has to stand front and center. And despite the fact that we're very fortunate to have a group of principals in the company, from Chris Medvitz to Tyler Elick to Brad Malkus to Howard Warner to Norm to Warren Kong to myself, all of whom, and now Charles Foster has joined that group of principals. But the work is first, and that's why Norm and I named the company Light Switch right from the get-go, rather than Featherstone Schwab Lighting Design or whatever, which was unusual at the time. Mm-hmm. You've been doing this a hot minute, like I have. Sure. Most of the lighting design practices up to that point were named after the principals. Right. Now we'd sound like a really bad lawyer with all of those names. So work first. Secondly, was we saw a shift in the way people were consuming entertainment. And that was that audiences were becoming increasingly less discriminating. And what I mean by that is not that they were less interested in an elevated experience, but they were less prepared to compromise those standards based on where they're receiving their entertainment. So this was sort of the era of Rainforest Cafe in the restaurant field, IMAX really coming to a forefront in motion pictures, museums shifting to a more deeply immersive kind of experience, theme parks coming out of everything being about jump scares and far more into storytelling. So all of these threads were overlapping. So we saw a trend where every corporate show wanted to be more like a rock show. Every rock show wanted to tell stories like a theatrical production. Every museum wanted to excite and engage people in the same way that a theme park did. Every theme park wanted to entertain and educate in the way that museums were. And all of this stuff was crisscrossing, and then the whole hospitality scene was all turned upside down by this notion of immersive hospitality entertainment. So we saw this ability to pull all these threads together and build a company that cherry-picked in the best possible way all the best tools and techniques from those disparate fields to bring you unique solutions. And as well, you've had a broad and diverse career. Mm-hmm. What often interests people is not the field they're in, but what's going on in other fields. So it's still the way, when we're talking to concert performers, they're super interested in talking to us about theme parks and museums. The theme park and museum guys want to know what's going on in rock and roll. The hospitality people want to know what's going on in museums, because everybody's interested in what is attracting parts of the live experiential audience to spend their disposable income in that manner. Does that make sense?
It sure makes sense. What's the response that you get? Why are they doing that? What's their motivation?
I think from a client standpoint, or
yes,
from an audience
standpoint?
From a client standpoint, I think it is the search for connection with audience. And I think something that you and I share is a passion for storytelling. And I think at its roots, what we do at Light Switch, what you do, what many of the companies that we work with to create and craft events, is it's all about telling an authentic story. And I think what has happened is audiences have shifted, that they've developed a really good spidey sense, for want of a better expression, about authenticity. And I think audiences are looking for experiences that feel like they are created by people who care, for audiences that demand an elevated level of authenticity and storytelling and depth of experience. If I'm going to spend my money with you, museum, restaurant, theme park, concert experience, I want to feel like my presence matters. I want to, and especially post-pandemic, that getting on a plane, that going downtown, that my physical participation in your experience is honored and valued, and that it matters. And I think that's always been there. I think the pandemic amplified that. But I think over the arc of the 30 plus years we've been in business, we've seen this increase in the need for the audience to feel that their presence is valued, as it should be. Regardless of what my check says on it, the people that pay my bills, like the people that pay your bills, are the people that's sitting in the audience, whether it's a corporate meeting or whether it's a concert.
Sure. Do you believe that the authenticity has been compromised by creativity or the lack of either?
A lack of focus on what's the essence of the story will always compromise a project. So I think it's a red flag for me when I'm talking to a client and they can't elucidate the story they want to tell. I think if a client doesn't understand clearly the story they want to tell, then we're going to have a really hard time as a group of creative professionals standing behind that and telling that in a way that feels authentic. And I think the audiences can sense that.
I just spoke with a mutual friend of ours, Bill Bunkers.
Love that man.
Great guy. And his consulting business talks a lot about audience interaction, audience credibility, reaching that credibility with the story. And he tells a story about doing the research for a show, and it was a sales meeting, and only 16% of the audience in the pre-conference survey understood the message they were trying to give. And that changed afterwards in the post-survey. But he talks about reaching the audience credibly and telling the story that they can understand, because if you can't tell the story to the people who are selling your product's not going to sell.
Yeah, I think it was, I'm probably going to misquote here, but I think it was Einstein that said, if you can't explain something in 2 sentences, you don't understand it well enough.
Right.
And I think the same applies to our business. I think if you can't elevate a pitch, even the most complicated show, and really cook down the essence of that, I'm not even sure how you're going to be able to measure your success, to be honest. So I think one of the things that we try to do is, despite the fact we're both sitting here talking, is actually be really good listeners and try and help our clients filter through the creative process in a way that finesses rather than expands. You know, I think a lot of the time, you and I have been in a bunch of these meetings before, where you're like, hang on a minute, are we spending 2 hours sitting in this conference room to make this more complicated? Or are we spending 2 hours in this conference room to make it more simple? And I think it was Woody Guthrie that said, any fool can make something more complicated. It takes a touch of genius to make things simpler. And I think that's what we try to do at Lightswitch, is help our clients make things simpler. Now, that simpler can still involve 1,000 moving lights and a giant show or whatever, or it can involve 6 lights and a really intimate presentation, but simple needs to be focused first of all on the story that you're telling.
Well, that, and the audience has to be able to relate to that story, and I think that's also a fact.
That's
simplicity.
the authenticity piece, I think, as well.
And simplicity, frankly. You don't need to complicate it more than it needs to be complicated.
Right.
So talk to me about your relationship with crews and how you work with your people. What do you find difficult? What do you find easy about managing, directing crews?
Well, hands down, my favorite part of the business is people. I am, like you, a people person. And it was also one of the reasons why naming the company not after ourselves was really important to Norm and I. Because obviously, you know a lot of them. We have people who are employees at Lightswitch. We have people who are perma-lancers at Lightswitch, and we have people that drift in and out of our orbit. Sometimes they're working for us, sometimes they're working for other designers. But we feel when they're working on a Lightswitch project, we are Lightswitch. And no person is an island, Randy. You know, with the level of complexity, with the level of technology, I lean so hard on the crews that I'm fortunate to work with to frankly help me not screw it up. And the level of execution expertise that we are so fortunate to work with our crews. And we try to do two things that sound like they're almost contradictory, but we try to keep them in balance at Light Switch. One is for there to be no such thing as a bad source for a good idea, and really be open to that. And new eyes are incredibly valuable. And that means that from a culture standpoint at Light Switch, we have to always remain open to some of the newest people that we work with, as well as some of the seasoned professionals, because there are more times than I can count that people that are new to the company or new to doing shows go, why are we doing it this way? And the only answer is, well, because that's the way we've always done it, which is
Sure.
not always. Sometimes that's a valid answer, but sometimes it's not. So that's the one side.
Sometimes it's the wrong answer.
Frequently it's the wrong answer. The other thing is for we've always strived for Light Switch to be a place where it is safe to fail. And if that means in some ways we sort of aim to fail, that's not the way it is at all. But our philosophy is, as a creative business that stands or falls, the only thing we sell is our creative ideas. I mean, obviously we've got studios and a little bit of hardware, but we're basically about empowering people to do their best thinking. We believe you can only ever do your best thinking if there is openness to the potential for failure. Interesting work in any field always happens at the edges. The interesting music happens at the edges. The interesting performance art happens at the edges. The interesting writing is always where you're pushing those boundaries. Haley tells a great story about David Bowie, who once said that he wants his work to always be at a specific point. And the way he described it was, you know that sense when you're in the ocean or you're in a pool and your feet are just barely on the bottom, and you're at that tipping point between being able to retreat to safety or just kind of drifting out to sea. There's that point where peril is always present. Mm-hmm. And that's where bold work happens. That's where the bravest work happens, is at that point where you're prepared to risk things. But the only way you can do that is if you're surrounded by people that support you in doing that and embrace that and go, well, that didn't go terribly well. How can we course correct? How can we work together to make that work? And I don't wish to suggest that we're reckless or we don't think things through or we don't vet things or we don't validate things. Nothing could be further from the truth. We spend a lot of time doing that. But pushing boundaries means being bold and being brave. And you and I work in a bunch of different fields. And I think that's one of the things that we can bring to some of our corporate clients, where sometimes, for very understandable reasons, safety and reassurance is an important value, to push those things a little bit. And some of our favorite clients, I think, are the organizations which are interested in the, well, has anybody done this before? No. Well, that seems kind of scary. Or, has anybody done this before? No. Well, that sounds great. There's probably something exciting there. Let's do our homework and make sure that this is vetted and validated.
That philosophy is great, and I love the fact that you try to push and you try to do the next best thing. And I remember the days in this business where clients insisted, what's the coolest, best new thing that we can try? We don't see that much anymore, at least in the corporate world. And I know that you're stepping beyond that and around that as much as you can these days. You've moved on into other things. But does that apply also to where you are now in the larger arena entertainment shows?
Yeah,
they don't want to take the chances, or they do?
It's an interesting question, and I think the same applies in the corporate world, to be honest. There are some corporate clients we work with who are very risk averse because that's their kind of corporate culture. There are some corporate clients we work with who, particularly in the tech space, who have experimentation in their DNA. So they are more corporate philosophy aligned with the notion of being bold and daring and experimental. The same thing applies in the entertainment field. Let's use some examples. You know, at the moment we're continuing our work with Hans Zimmer. Hans is a consummate experimenter. He's constantly making his own instruments. He's constantly pushing the musicians he works with. Often almost without exception, if you say to Hans, nobody else has done this, he'll be like, well, let's give it a try. Yeah. You know, he's very interested in experimenting and pushing those boundaries. We're just finishing the US tour with Halsey, and she's the same way. Halsey is very interested in pushing the way the live experience can work. Conversely, there are some artists we work with who want to see proof of concept. They want to, well, where can I go see this? And this is one of the areas where our breadth of work helps us, because a lot of the time that means we can say, look, yes, we've never done this in a one-off special events environment, but we've done something very similar in a theme park. So if you want to go see it, you can go to Universal Studios or one of the other theme parks that we've worked in, and you can experience something very similar to this. And this is part of that sort of cherry picking the best sources for the right kind of work. Randy, I think it's just the way people are. You know this as well. There are some people who are interested in being bold and brave and innovative and experimenting, and there are some people for whom reassurance and safety and comfort is an important value. I'm in favor of honoring all of those, and that's part of people's individual process.
Do you find that your boldness conflicts with the creative safety that people want to have?
Yeah, I do, and that's one thing that I personally try to be mindful of, is that especially when you're getting to know a new client, especially in a new client environment, I tend to be very, damn the torpedoes, let's try this, kind of, let's be bold, let's be brave. I have to remind myself that that's not the way everybody thinks and the way everybody feels, and to be a steward of my client's creative process, I need to honor them with their process. Now, certainly as we get to know each other, that relationship can shift and grow. But when one is on the equivalent of a first date with a new client,
sure.
This goes back to what I was saying about listening. And for somebody who is, I think, with justification renowned for talking a lot, shutting up and listening to what the client has to say is really important.
Right. You brought up a few minutes ago, working with new people, first-time people, first show even you mentioned. Do you find it difficult to find new blood in this business?
Well, we're very fortunate that we have a strong relationship with a lot of higher education. As many of the people in the Light Switch organization are very firmly connected to their alums, so that's a really good through line. We work with a number of mentoring programs. One example is ETC, the manufacturer of lighting fixtures. Fred Foster, who was the founder of ETC, was a huge proponent for supporting educational ventures. Both the kids' schools, when they were growing up, I would call Fred and be like, hey Fred, we could really use some lights. He'd be like, what do you need? Just tell me what you need, and it's done. I mean, a truly lovely human being who passed away a few years ago and is sorely missed in our industry. But Fred set up a mentoring program, which we're engaged with, which puts together a group of students every year, which and then a broad range of industry professionals, and we just do these kind of meet and greet, and it's great seeing these little kind of relationships work within those within that organization, and on occasion those mentoring relationships turn into employment. We get a lot of resumes.
Sure.
Earlier in the year, sort of the April, May time period, we get a lot of resumes. We reach out to a lot of tertiary education institutions because we think it's important for us to stay in contact with them. We cannot complain about there being no new talent in the industry if we're not prepared to engage in supporting there being new talent in the industry. So I think we don't see a shortage of that, but it's a through line and an ongoing process that needs to be constantly supported and constantly fed and nurtured.
Light switch. You talked a little bit about how it got started. Do you have any, would you do it again the same way, or would you change it? What would you do next time?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You know, when Norm and I wanted to start Light Switch, we spent a lot of time talking to people in the industry about their companies, really smart people. Mario Educate from OSA, who has been a big mentor to me and somebody I really admire and look up to in the way he runs his company. Robert Carone from Upstaging is another great example of somebody who runs, I think, a remarkable organization. And one common refrain that came up, and as an aside, also a number of people outside of the entertainment industry, people, a good friend of mine who's an attorney and has a legal practice, some architects we work with, there was a common refrain, and that was most enterprises, tension comes from two things: feeling of disparate workload and feeling of disparate financial remuneration. So even though Light Switch is ran and organized by the group of principals as an entity, each studio is individually operated. The nearest model is probably a franchise, but it's far more unified than a franchise. So that's a real double-edged sword. So we've got a diverse range of owners, now 8 owners, who are, all of whom are strongly minded people who are frankly often used to being a big voice in the room. And in a few weeks, we have one of our annual partners groups. We work very hard on speaking regularly every week, the group of principals, schedules permitting.
Sure.
And we get together at least annually as a group. That structure itself is incredibly effective in keeping us as friends, and I'm very proud of the fact that we are. I mean, God knows, there are definitely times when we piss each other off. There are definitely times when we disagree. But I mean, the fact that Norm and I have stayed partners for 32 years now, and there are other people that have been in the organization for 2 decades and more, I think speaks volumes to a structure that really works. Does it have its challenges? It 100% has its challenges. We cannot move as nimbly institutionally as I think we would like, and certainly as nimbly institutionally as some younger people in our organization would like. I think a more traditional corporate structure with a C-suite and then everybody being subordinate works very effectively from an execution standpoint, but I'm not sure it would serve us as well culturally. I think we're well served with our model of everybody feeling like they work for a studio within an organization, and we've got this kind of Venn diagram. And one of the challenges, and it's one of the reasons why our logo is the way our logo is that we try and make the overlap in that Venn diagram between all the studios as large as we possibly can. But there's also room for individualism. Does that make sense? You know, I mean, most franchise agreements are pretty rigid. I think some of the things that we might have done differently is I think embracing a clearer definition of what we stood for. I think, considering the fact that we consider ourselves storytellers, I think Norm and I Forrest Gumped our way into this business without spending perhaps quite as much time as we could have done thinking philosophically about how we were going to grow into the scale of company that we clearly had potential to, because we did. Now we've addressed that. We one of the things that we're doing when we get together in a few weeks in San Francisco is we're doing a bunch of work on our mission, vision, values, so to make sure that we're aligned with those core fundamentals, and kind of checking in with ourselves that as the company changes, we're in the space where, you know, I'm kind of like one of the middle kids in the group age-wise. But I'm 61 on Friday, so the notion of what's the next chapter of my life, how does retirement look, how does succession work, is really present for us. So how do, in the company with four of the principals, me and then the other three that are older than me, at least looking in that direction, how does that change the way that we want to influence the company? Because we want to stay young, and we want to stay vibrant, and we want to stay successful, and we want to stay aspirational. And that means that we can't be perceived as a business that's run by a bunch of 60-year-old white guys. We frankly need to be embracing all of this new talent. So that's an incredibly long and maybe not very direct answer to your question. I think if I was to talk to my younger self about this, I would suggest mapping out a clearer path to what at the time would have seemed like fantasy. I mean, Randy,
but at the time, would you have known to do that?
Absolutely not. Otherwise, we'd have done it. I mean, it was Norm and I. Norm and I
with an idea
about 15 years into running the company that we'd never actually codified an agreement between us about this, and we were still doing this on our trial basis. I mean, Norm and I went out to California. We spent several days. A bunch of it at Point Reyes Beach, talking about what we would aspire for the company to be. But it was the two of us working at our kitchen tables. Frankly, exactly the same way we ended up over the pandemic.
Right.
Working at all of us working at our kitchen tables. Yeah.
I remember, 25 years ago, talking to you over a kitchen table at your house, asking you how Lightswitch is organized, because I thought it was a brilliant idea, and I had some designs to try and start a studio the same way with some colleagues of mine. And you were kind enough to share those operating papers, which was like 2 sheets of paper of what you do.
Oh yeah. It's got a little more complicated.
I'm sure
it's got a little more grown up since then.
Well, and I was amazed at how simple it was, but how to the point it was. And I think it still is. Like you say, it's gotten more complicated, but it is still to the point of what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, and I think to be fair and less glib, the complication has turned into a foundation beneath what is a very simple story, which is we want to empower people. We want to empower people to do the best work that they can, and that any organization that's run the right way should be more than the sum of its parts. And we feel that we are absolutely more than the sum of our parts, but we have amazing people that work with us. And Randy, there are people that come into our orbit and work with Lightswitch, sometimes for a year, sometimes for a decade, and then say, this maybe isn't for me. It's certainly a very unique way of working. But there are also people, you know a lot of them, for whom it really serves them, and for the people that the organization serves, we could not be more grateful. That's exactly what Norm and I had in mind. And for the people that it doesn't serve, we don't want anybody to stay here because they feel they have to. I mean, we have and will continue, this is going to sound strange, to bend over backwards to make it easy for people to leave, if that makes sense. Because I would hate for people to feel, oh my gosh, I've got to stay here because this is going to be a difficult, an ugly divorce, or I'm stuck here because of my health insurance, or I'm stuck here because of any of this. What a horrible position to be in, that you feel kind of trapped like that.
Well, you're never happy working like that.
Right.
Nobody's happy working
and nobody's going to do their best work.
Yeah,
working like that.
And they're going to hate their job, and they're not going to continue doing a good job.
Yeah.
So why do that? We talked a little bit about people. Let's move into the technology now. Where is your technology lights, my technology video? It's changing constantly. It's changed dramatically since we both started in this crazy business. Where's it going?
Well, I actually think that I've always had the philosophy that what you do and what I do are inexorably linked. I think that's why you and I became friends from the first time we worked together, because there has traditionally been a level of adversarial behavior between the lighting world and the video world. Some of it coming from a technology basis, but some of it coming for reasons that I simply don't understand. I mean, it's a bit of a flippant thing to say. I'm quite renowned for having flippant things to say. But I'm in the memory making business. You guys are in the evidence making business. I mean, if somebody says they think the show looks weird, the first thing they're going to do is pull the videotapes or the modern equivalent, the digital equivalent thereof, and look at it. So I've always felt that anytime somebody's pointing a camera at what I'm doing, it's important that I'm at least mindful of what the camera does. Now, obviously, there's a legacy to that. 30 years ago, when you were pointing a camera at a show, it needed to be lit incredibly differently and often incongruently for a good live experience.
Yes.
Our worlds have converged. And that's an opportunity to me to liberate both departments and to have us both work closer together. You know, we try to work very closely with the video department. One of the things that we do, let me use one example, is there's this constant battle about color temperature. And this is related to your question about technology. Obviously, in almost every live experiential project we do, LED screens have become the dominant content delivery methodology. Whether it's a concert, whether it's a corporate meeting, whether it's a product launch, it's LED screens everywhere. One of the things that we established a number of years ago is the thing that has the biggest degree of variability is lighting. The thing that has the least degree of variability is what the client is seeing when they're looking at the screens, because they know if it's Cisco, they know what their blue looks like. If it's McDonald's, they know what their gold looks like. There is no arguing with them because they are right. So establish that as the key anchor point, and then use technology to support that notion. So what we tend to do almost exclusively in the live event field is white balance to the screen.
Right.
Because we white balance to the screen looks right on camera, the colors look right on camera, we can make the person change any color you want. If the video director comes to us and says, I'd really like the people to be purple, we can go, interesting choice, but we can absolutely do that.
We have a button for purple.
Exactly, we do have a button for purple. So I think that's a great example of how we can work collaboratively to use technology to improve the quality of the product we delivered. I'm sure you remember this. For a long time, there were discussions about, do you want the stage to look good to the eye? Do you want the stage to look good on iMac? There were discussions about, do you want the person to look good, or do you want the background to be the right color? And we've now moved into a world where we've all got a lot more control, so we can use that in ways that enable our storytelling fundamentally. Because certainly in the corporate environment, the audience knows too. You get a room full of people who work for McDonald's, they know when the gold is right. When you get a room full of people that work for Cisco, they know when the blue's wrong. And equally concert performers. As we work in an increasingly visually motivated era, Hans Zimmer knows a thing or two about the way things are supposed to look on a screen.
Sure.
Halsey, who is deeply embedded in the creation of the content for her show, she knows what she's looking at. If she shows up and is looking at the iMag and either she looks weird or the background looks weird, she's going to look at the likes of you and me and go, why am I hiring you idiots?
Right.
I'm not. And as soon as you start to get into the trying to use technology as a way to explain it, even if you are right, as far as I'm concerned, you've lost the room.
Right.
The only correct answer there is we're going to do everything we can to get this right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I think is interesting and exciting about technology. The other way that I think our two disciplines work together is this notion of thinking about there not really being a line between the lighting and the video department. A lot of the time, we were very early adopters of things like mapping the lighting rig, certainly in large-scale shows, to the video content.
Right.
It all needs to be talking the same vocabulary, the audience isn't sitting there going, well, that's a lighting fixture, so it's okay that that's a different color than that, and this doesn't feel joined up, but that's okay because the content designer was doing one thing and the lighting designer was doing another thing. The more coherent and joined up we can make those stories, the better. Generally, in most people's creative process, in sitting here in 2025, it starts with video content. Certainly in the corporate world, and increasingly in the live entertainment world. That's where the stone goes in the pond first, is people start to think first about what's going to go on that screen. So using that as the creative touchstone is a way that we can take that technology, and whether it is mapping video content out of the Disguise server into the MA console and treating the lighting rig as a big, extremely low-res video screen, and also going the other way. There are a number of times in entertainment projects now where we do things like take control of the output level of the servers, so we can use extremely bright moments on the LED screen as a percussive moment of lighting impact more than it would be video impact. Those are really interesting ways, I think, to glue those primary visual disciplines together.
Is that difficult to explain to people who don't get the concept? Are you having trouble selling that concept?
I think the best way to explain any concept is to try and get jargon out of the way as much as possible, and to not try and explain something to somebody that they're probably not going to understand. But the notion of we're trying to think about lighting and video as essentially the same thing, because if you get up really close to a high-res LED screen, it's basically the world's most expensive giant light bright.
Yes, it is.
It's a whole bunch of light bulbs, and especially as LED screens have become the prevalent display methodology, it's emittive. It's throwing light out into the room.
They've become the sets.
100%.
We don't build wooden sets anymore that move, that fly, that walk in, come down on the fly, or the door in the house and the walk through the stage. We don't do that anymore. It's all screens now.
And it's interesting you bring up the notion of movement as well. We're in the creative process on a project at the moment that initially the creative had a whole bunch of screens that moved. And we ran the numbers, and it's actually cheaper to put up a giant wall of LED and move the image through the giant wall of LED with all that inherent flexibility than it is to move the LED around. Sure. But
that changes your perspective also when you're talking one flat wall versus the depth that you might be able to gather from either screens or physical set pieces.
It does, but again, this is where technology can come to the rescue. You know,
because you can't walk through an LED wall.
Well, not yet, but things like Vanish. You know, that are these mesh membrane-based screens that give you the ability to have other layers and other depth behind them. Truly remarkable. You know, we're really leaning into Vanish on the Halsey design. The whole first act, which is really theatrical. Halsey shows an interesting way to embrace technology in my favorite kind of way, that you're not really aware of the technology. You know, the sort of metric I use is the iPad. You know, it's like as soon as you pick up your iPad and turn it on, the technology's gone. You're connected with the content, you're connected with what you're consuming, whether it's reading a book on Kindle or whether it's watching a video or whatever, the technology goes away. So Halsey's first act is really theatrical with set pieces, and it's very interesting because it is the opposite of what you were talking about. There are very theatrical Moulin Rouge-esque set pieces, not by coincidence designed by my friend Derek McLean, who was a senior designer for Moulin Rouge, with this high-res Vanish screen with a band behind the screen with lights upstage of the band that you're only slightly aware of, so you get a sense of another world, which for the second half of the show is revealed, that you see the band, the screen flies out, you're aware of all this. So it's like these kind of like peeling away the layers. So I think the interesting and exciting next step in embracing technology for me is how these different physical architectures of LED screen can be embraced in ways which create a deeper world, quite literally in some cases, for the audience.
And it's working.
It's definitely working. It's remarkable.
No, I've said for years the best effect in any film or any movie or any stage is the one you don't see.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
What was it Arthur C. Clarke said? Any technology suitably advanced is indistinguishable from magic. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
as opposed to reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
What can we as an industry do to improve message delivery?
You mean internally to the industry, externally, or both?
I'd like to, we could do both. We could talk a little bit about both. I think my original thought is delivery of message to audience.
Okay.
But I think delivery of message within our industry is vitally important. That doesn't happen right now.
Okay. So I think delivery of message to audience is really staying focused on the audience's perspective. And I mean this intellectually as well as physically. I try very hard to experience all of my projects from multiple vistas. Video is incredibly helpful in this. Hey, can we get a wide shot that's a lock off? Can we put in some spy cams? But just get off my ass and walk around.
Right.
What's it like in the cheap seats? If we're designing an arena show, not what does it look like from row D on the arena floor, because frankly, if I can't make it look good from row D on the arena floor, they've hired the wrong person. But what does it look like from row triple Z in the third balcony? Because those are the people that we really need to make sure we're reaching in any experiential event is again, we're back to the edges, the people at the periphery. So I think being really aware of how the experience is going to work in the creative standpoint from all vistas. Obviously, we need to present to clients in any kind of avenue, but thinking about not just a front and center rendering. Michael Downs, a senior designer I really love working with, is really great at this. Downsy will always do multiple different vistas. He actually uses some technology very early in the rendering stage, where you can virtually walk around the room and get a sense of different spaces. I think that's really important. Making sure everybody feels engaged, making sure everybody feels like they have a good view, like they feel connected to screens, all of those things. The second thing, and this is harder, is really asking our audiences what they want and whether we delivered what they wanted. I think a lot of post-event surveys are very focused for really understandable reasons in checkbox kind of stuff. One of the things that I like a lot about the post-event surveys we get back from the Morton Arboretum after our illumination project is they ask more open-ended questions. Now, that means we do a project that closes on the 1st or 2nd of January, and we usually get the feedback in April because there's a lot to go through. But there's real gold in those surveys in digging into what people say about their experience, and most importantly, what people say about what they thought they were going to get that they didn't, and what they thought they were going to in a negative way, and what they thought they were going to get that they didn't in a positive way. So I think being open to talking to people, and I love, in a hopefully vaguely non-creepy way, talking to people that are in the audiences. Hey, I'm part of the design. You're in the lift going up to your room, people see the badge. Oh, you work for Cisco?
Right.
No, I'm the lighting designer. Oh, great. Did you like the show?
Right.
No, there were lights in my eyes. Oh, crap. Where were you sitting? Let me go look at that. That gives me the ability to do better. I would really welcome the opportunity with a lot of our year-over-year projects for there to be a little bit of a user group, a little bit of a round table, talk to people. And I think in a bigger picture version of that, staying aligned with the way people are consuming their entertainment, their information. Clearly, we're working in a world where, with relatively few exceptions, movies are tending to get a little bit shorter. People are simultaneously consuming video content in really staccato, TikTok, YouTube story kind of soundbitey things. And then also binge watching on Netflix. So how you're supposed to program for those two extremes, I don't know. But being aware of the way people are consuming their content, a couple of the corporate clients we're working with are really focused on making sure that they don't create a meeting that could have been an email, and using the lens of, is what we're doing something you had to be in the room to experience? And I think for all of us, how do we make this feel special? So that's to that audience.
That's a post-pandemic phenomena, I believe. Because to come back from the Zoom calls, the team calls, the group, everybody in their kitchen meeting platforms, to doing meetings today where they're deciding, do we need to spend that money for this? And if we're going to spend that money to bring everybody to Vegas or to put 5,000 people in a room, puts a lot more pressure on the delivery of the content at the right time, in the right place, and the right method.
I don't know about your calendar, but certainly our calendar at LightSwitch has changed to significantly fewer. It's June at Cisco Live. We're very fortunate that it's June at Cisco Live, but that's not the way our calendar is structured anymore. We used to be, there were these year-over-year shows, and now I think a lot of companies are being a lot more discriminating. And I think if we reach the point with any of our clients, Cisco are a great example, where they felt we're not going to have benefit from doing this experience, they would not do it. And I frankly think that's good, because the last thing we need is people going, I flew all the way to, it's seemingly almost always Vegas at the moment, to Vegas. Why? I didn't get anything out of it. If I'm going to go to Vegas, I'd rather just go to Vegas. So I think applying a metric of value is very much a post-pandemic thing, but I think it's long overdue.
In this world today, they're evaluating that potential return on investment a lot more critically, which puts a lot more critical pressure on the message they're delivering, and that they have a message and they deliver it correctly, and that the audience receives it correctly. You were talking about audience reception earlier too. Are they getting what you're trying to say? And the post-meeting surveys have to feed that out, have to deliver that to the companies, both the production companies and to the sponsoring company as well.
I think messaging-wise, we continue to miss a huge opportunity in our industry. And we talk about it a lot with the newer members of our LightSwitch family about how challenging that makes our industry aspirationally for people who have grown up to value those things. We all, certainly most of the people that are yours or my age in the industry, fell into doing it by one route or the other.
Sure.
We're now looking to solicit people who we want to make a conscious choice to join the live event industry. There are some people who just seem to have it in their blood and want to do it for the same reasons that we'll do. But we could do so much better about making it feel aspirational. Now, certainly in the concert touring industry, there is a real focus on improved mental health going on at the moment. The touring's rough, especially if you're the fourth person on a six-person lighting crew or the seventh person on a six-person lighting crew. Keeping a focus on positive mental health is hard. Touring is
it's hard on everybody.
It is hard on everybody, and making sure that there are resources for people to have healthy support for mental health issues is really important. But we can always do better in that regard. We can always make it feel that people are supported and nurtured and cared for. And everybody's allowed to have a shit day, but needs to feel that they're supported in doing it.
And that tomorrow's not going to be there.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. So I think there is always room for us to be doing more as an industry, and we try to support that in any way that we can.
Did doing this just come to you way back when you were playing the drums and you were in the band? Was there a moment when you said, I want to do this for a living, I want to be in this business for a living? Was there a magic wand that just tapped you on the brain and said, do this, John?
I think it was post the Smiths, when Johnny left the band, and and I was faced with, oh, shit, what do I do now? That I really was kind of aware of. I'm actually now a lighting designer, even though I don't think even then I was using the phrase lighting designer. I think it was lighting guy.
The lighting guy.
Yeah, I'm a lighting guy now, and I kind of like this. So let's find other things to do. Now, I was also very fortunate that Johnny is a very fiercely loyal person and a very good friend, and not long after after Johnny left the band, let's give him credit for what was a very bold move at the time, Chrissy Hine from the Pretenders called and said, I need a new guitarist for the Pretenders, and Johnny, to my never-ending gratitude, said, I'll come and play guitar in your band, but my friend John has to do the lights, because he's the only person that stood by me when the band fell apart. Deal breaker. So I was very fortunate, and that's another opportunity knocks answer kind of thing. So I think that was the
it's
big...
right place, right time, opportunities.
Better be lucky than good, right?
You're right. Well, I think I've been lucky just sitting here talking to you.
Well, anytime I get to spend time in a room with you, Randy, it's nice that we're in the room being able to see each other rather than a disconnected voice on intercom,
on headset 300 yards away.
Which is usually the way it is. Yeah.
Right. No, it's been great. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, man.
Thank you.
All right, take care.